Quite an impressive start.
Well, that was quick. One banishment down and one traitor caught in what ended up being a landslide vote against the banished traitor. Before we get into that, we had the first breakfast, which means the first murder. The previous night, the traitors discussed the possibility of murdering Brooke, Dylan, or Kimberly. I could perfectly see the case for any of them being murdered, though a little surprised that it wasn't Brooke. Brooke mentioned in episode 1 about knowing Dan prior to the game, so I wondered if Dan was wary of that relationship being a factor in him possibly being banished.
I think I could tell if Dan was lying to me. He's the person I know the most.
It was neither Brooke or Dylan. Kimberly, the psychic, was the first victim.
I bet you she didn't see that coming.
Not surprising to see the traitors went for Kimberly. As Loryn said, if Kimberly brought up any names, the faithfuls would believe her. I don't know if that would have been the case for all of the faithfuls, but I wouldn't have been surprised if enough followed to banish someone.
Whoever you are, I hope you realise there are spirits are coming for you tonight.
Equally, she could have led many astray by naming faithfuls instead of traitors. Kimberly was suspicious of Robbie, and she isn't a traitor, so this could have been an opportunity missed if the traitors were aware of her suspicions.
I was surprised that Kimberly was murdered, because that showed to me that the traitors actually thought of her as a threat.
Get rid of the psychic, it kind of makes sense.
Even if you didn't believe in it, someone who's going to sit at the table and drop some names and they might just happen upon one of yours, like that's someone you want to get rid of.
I will admit I was a little disappointed they went for Kimberly because I wanted to see what would end up happening if she led them to banish a faithful and any chaos it could bring. Everyone barely had time to digest their breakfast and the news of Kimberly's murder before we saw Justine's VT and how she had already partially cracked it.
I'm starting to have weird suspicions about Loryn because she is so quiet. I think she'd be a good traitor because I don't think people would think she would be. And Dan too, I think. I got a weird vibe from Dan, so I'm going to keep a little eye on him as well.
To already have 2/3 of the traitors in her sight within a day is quite some feat. Some faithfuls on various other editions don't even have one traitor on their list up until the end of the show. Justine wasn't the only faithful that clocked Loryn, and even Dan had concerns about his fellow traitor and how she was within the group.
It was a huge mistake today for Loryn to not be heavily involved in the game.
Loryn was so far into the background during this episode that if she wasn't a traitor, I wouldn't have remembered she was even playing this game. Others mentioned having chats with her, but as for the group situations, it wasn't a kind edit to her. I totally understand it from an introvert's perspective, as some are not the best suited to big groups, but I do wonder how much of it was due to the weight of being a traitor. As people were mentioning why she was a consideration for banishment for them, I thought the most interesting comment came from Sam. As a friend of Loryn's, Sam is more privy to her personality, and he reaffirmed her comments about it. The telling thing was that he had noticed a change from her. If I was one of the faithfuls and I heard that, it would be the confirmation I needed to write Loryn's name down. I wonder how much of an influence Sam's words were to the other votes for Loryn. I was wondering if anyone spotted Loryn's reaction when Dan said he voted for her. There was more reaction there than when Sam, her friend, voted for her. Maybe there was no reaction for Sam's vote because there were too many votes for her anyway. It was a pretty big swing in Loryn's direction with 13 votes for her. Before the roundtable, we were hearing a lot of suspicions towards Robbie. In the previous episode, a lot of the players poured their green liquid into Robbie's glass to signify they trusted her the least.
The person that I potentially will put up to get booted is Robbie.
So you think people were filling up her vial because they thought there was a mystery that they didn't know?
Yeah.
But you know what, if she does call it, then we were still right to get rid of her in a way. Do you know what I mean?
With her slip-up and the previous suspicions, I'm surprised Robbie came out of the round table without a single vote to her name. I think 3 things helped her in this episode. Robbie was the first person at the round table to mention Loryn's name. Mentioning a name who ends up also being suspected by others seemed to work in Robbie's favour. Another reason, it felt too obvious to have Robbie as a traitor. The third thing was what Brody said.
I just feel like no one knows her, so it's easier to jump to a conclusion. Most of us know the least.
Yeah,
I think what's happened is herd mentality.
Brody makes a very good and interesting point. A lot of the players are celebrities and know each other, so they've already established a level of trust due to those pre-existing relationships, though how much that actually helps them remains to be seen. Because there's so many of these known personalities, they've questioned why a hairdresser would do the show, and if there's more to her that she hasn't revealed. Well, there's a lot of money to win, so maybe that's why a hairdresser would want to participate. With Loryn's banishment, the traitors had the option to murder or seduce. Dan and Matt opted for murder and discussed Anna, Kristen, and Justine as being candidates for murder. With Justine already suspicious of Dan, it will unknowingly be beneficial for him to murder Justine. We shall see who the next victim is.